I think I'm a landscape photographer because I have to be. I have to have a reason in my life to be outdoors and move around the world and try and understand what this planet is about. It's something fundamental about who I am that forces me into these places. I've been a photographer now for over 25 years, and I did not fully realize how much time and energy I had spent trying to cope with the failings of silver as a means of recording light. With film, you're always thinking about how can this film manage to record what I'm seeing? How can I try and manipulate it into being able to see what my eyes are seeing? That's where the process has changed so dramatically. I now turn on my Macintosh, plug in my Better Light or my Dicomed camera, and do a pre-scan, and the image is sitting before my eyes. When I first went out with the inventor of the Dicomed and Better Light cameras, Michael Collette, in January of 1994, we shot a bunch of film and we shot his digital camera. That was the last day I bothered to shoot film. What I saw at the end of that day so completely amazed me in terms of color accuracy, resolution, detail, dynamic range that I never wanted to shoot film again. So I had to respond to that, and I had to come up with something that was appropriate for this new technology, something that was hard. So I dreamed up with a new eye, the Digital National Parks Project. In this very valley, Carlton Watkins was making photographs in 1863 using a process called the wet plate collodion process. He saw it on the spot. He got to do something I didn't get to do anymore because I'm using film that has to be processed sometime later, someplace separate from the experience of making the photograph. And so when this whole digital process came along and suddenly I could see my photograph as I was making it, wherever I happened to be, there was this inevitable reach back through time to remember what all of the early landscape photographers had been able to do, to see their photographs on the glass plates. And now I can see it as a finished photograph as I'm standing next to the Merced River while I'm making the photograph. It's an astounding journey. The difference in the printing is also rather phenomenal. The darkroom experience was always burdened by such a distance from the experience of making the photograph, and a lot of that has been shifted up front. So a lot of what I would have done in the darkroom later, I'm now doing on site when I care the most about the photograph. So the act of printing now is done in the light, not in the dark. And I kind of like that because the whole subject matter of photography is light. And I'm in the light when I'm printing now. That's the way it should be. For my final prints, I'm using an Iris Realist printer on watercolor paper. And I'm using an Apple core technology called Color Sync to color manage the transform from my original red, green, blue files to the Iris on rag paper. And I'm 95% of the way there with my first print. My portal into my digital photography is Adobe Photoshop software and the Macintosh PowerBook. The more powerful the PowerBook, the more able I am to be able to really understand what it is I've just done. Photography is always about a process of discovery for me. I never know exactly what I'm going to photograph. Sometimes something really wonderful comes out of that. Mount St. Helens was one of the hardest days of my life. We spent most of the day in gray ash and rock. When I got to the top, it was all worth it. I looked over the top of that crater and looked into a play of color and light that I could barely believe. It had oranges, reds, greens, and yellows where I expected grays. It was an amazing sight. I knew I could capture with the digital camera so much more than I ever could have captured with film. And to be up on top of the volcano, looking into my color PowerBook and seeing the image on the screen, turning my head and seeing the real volcano. That's a treasured experience. And it made for better photographs. We've grown to know the national parks through color landscape photography and postcard renditions. Generally oversaturated, over-colorized, overly contrasty, melodramatic visions of these places. I think there's something much more subtle and beautiful that goes on here, and I think that being able to capture a lot more of those nuances is one of the underlying aesthetic goals I have with this whole project. To quote a young Irish woman who was at a show of mine in Ireland, it's like putting eyeglasses on for the first time and seeing the world anew. When I started using the scanning camera, there was an implicit recognition that something in a panoramic sense was possible, because we're no longer limited to any sort of rectangular edge, but the entire surround of a space. So suddenly we have digital panoramic photographs as long as you want, and we can do 360 degrees at absolutely stunning resolution. And it has this wonderful immersive quality that puts you in a place like no other photographic experience I've ever seen. My interests are focused on this idea of trying to bring the photograph into the electronic darkroom to try and make the photograph more accurate, more clear. I can look at deep shade and brightly lit objects nearby and be able to render both simultaneously. And that's a wondrous freedom as a photographer, to be able to photograph in almost any kind of light, almost any kind of subject matter. The magic of digital photography is not only about the high-end cameras. There's an amazing number of consumer-level cameras that are producing very interesting results and opening up the whole world of digital imaging to people that are not professionals but have a love of imagery.
It's nice to be able to see it while you're still standing.
The PowerBooks have been the portable digital photography enabler. In digital video, in digital photography, it's been Apple, the PowerBook, and the Macintoshes that have made a huge difference in the way we live our professional lives. There's something about color. Something about pastel color and light and being able to see green like I've never been able to see it before. The gap is narrowing between what I'm seeing with my eyes and what I'm able to see as a recorded scene. That's narrowing because of the digital camera technology. It's narrowing because of the power that Apple continues to build into the PowerBooks.